FutureCon has been an amazing resource for an early stage startup like Track. It's affordable, we get amazing leads, it's an amazing group of people, they really care about the vendors, they really care about the attendees, and overall it's just been a fantastic way for an early stage startup to grow our business.
This is my first FutureCon, and I'm so grateful to be here. This is one of the best conferences that I've had the opportunity to attend lately. From the energy, from the people, from being able to connect with other security professionals in the field and learn from each other, it has been an incredible experience. I also love hearing from all the different security companies and learning what's out there on the market. And I'm really grateful to have had this experience, and hopefully we'll be back next year.
All right, welcome back. Hope everyone is enjoying lunch. Remember, iced tea stations are on either side if you want something besides water. So we're going to jump right into what is always one of the big highlights of our conferences, highlights of the day, which is our keynote session. We're very privileged to be able to welcome David Elfering, the Chief Information Security Officer from Carrix. Again, David, thank you for making your way into Seattle to give this talk and being kind of our headliner for the day. A little bit about David. He's an accomplished cybersecurity executive with over 20 years now of experience leading enterprise security programs, cyber risk management, regulatory compliance across global operations. He currently serves as the Director of Cybersecurity at Carrix and SSA Marine, driving strategy and resilience initiatives for one of the world's largest marine terminal operators and transportation service providers. Before joining Carrix, David was Senior Vice President at Marsh's Emerging Risk Group, where he advised CISOs, executives, and boards at over 200 companies on aligning cybersecurity strategies with business risk. His work there emphasized pragmatic, my favorite word, pragmatic approaches to resilience, insurance optimization, and critical risk reduction. I'm just going to hand it over to you, David, for the next hour. Again, big round of applause as David takes us through fundamentals, distressingly overlooked.
Thank you, sir. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It was a few months ago, and they reached out and said, hey, would you like to keynote? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And then about a month later, I'm like, what am I going to say to a room full of people in Seattle, right? Why would you listen to a guy who just moved here from Omaha, Nebraska, the flyover state? Omaha Steaks, hello. But just a quick plug, not a paid plug. So why would you listen to me? And you heard the bio. So there's some things, coming into this, I was looking for focus. I'm like, I've got 25 years in the industry. And so I started going, well, I'm going to give a 25-year retrospective of cybersecurity. And somebody said, no, that's probably not your best play. There's not enough coffee for that. And I want to call out and thank a couple of key people that gave me a lens to focus this. Steve Riley, who's a longtime participant in the Seattle security scene. Dan Burns, the founder of Optiv. Again, not a call out for Optiv, but just Dan Burns. And they, as I was discussing this with them, I sent a message to Steve Riley. I'm like, well, I don't know, here's all this stuff. And he's like, you know what? Fundamentals are distressingly overlooked. I'm like, whoa, stop right there. That's what I want to talk about. And so I come at this from 25 years of practice. I also come at this from a year at Marsh McLennan, and I'm giving away slide number 2 before I ever get off the title slide. And so I spent a year, I was a practitioner and had the opportunity to go to Marsh and be part of their emerging risk group. And one of the things that they asked us to do, kind of like, well, if you don't mind doing this, you can actually read everybody's cybersecurity applications, those surveys that you take. They're like, we say it's a short survey. Yeah, it's short, 132 questions short. Or so, plus or minus. And you can read those, and then we want you to coach them on the fundamental controls. I'm like, how often do you want me to do it? They're like, how often you want to do it? I'm like, I will do as many of these as you got customers. I will do this all day, every day. And I kind of did for about a year, which is a whole nother story, before I came to Seattle. And I learned some things, and some of it affirmed the things that I already thought, right? If you go into gathering data, and you gather enough data, it'll confirm the suspicions you already had, right? We want data to confirm the conclusions. But I learned some of what I thought was true, some of what I thought I was a bit off the mark. But what I really experienced in talking to 200 different security teams, from everything from crypto companies to beverage companies to online casinos, is there were recurring themes. And it was like Groundhog Day, in that I kept seeing this thing and I kept hearing the same thing. So what you're going to get from me today is not going to be science. It's going to be a little bit qualitative, which, coming from a reformed addict to quantitative risk management, is saying something. But the best things that I saw were the recurring focus on fundamentals. And that's what really refined this talk for me as I thought about, what would I say from 25 years of practice and a year of surveying intensely companies from the spectrum of the economy, is that the best programs I saw, it was independent of the spend, the budget. I saw tons of money flying out the door in some companies. I went, wow, that's a pie fight from breakfast to dinner right there. And I saw people that, it was a pie fight, but they were very focused on what they did. And they had some clarity around what they did. And so this is the benefit of talking about that 25 years of practice, as well as seeing things from the inside from 200 different companies. And there's a chance I talked with some of the people in this room, actually, you may not remember. But this brings us to the point of, we are here. We are here today, and we're like, how did we get here? Right? Everybody's phone is blowing up. You're getting emails from your SOC provider, from XDR, MDR, EDR, all the R's are covered, and I learned a few new ones today. ADR, I'm like, oh, I hadn't heard that one before. So there's new ones. And from all of these things that occur, where is the clarity? Where is the delivery? And we've added these things. We've pulled together a federation of various tools and systems, and I've been witness to this. I've been part of feeding that machinery. I've purchased a lot of stuff. It's a lot of fun. There's a dating period where you go out to dinner with all the reps, and you get cool stuff, and you have dinner, you get a steak, you get a glass of wine. But as we do all of this, are we adding clarity? We have all these complex tools. We have alert fatigue. We have the busyness. Everybody comes into work and they're like, I'm so busy, I'm not sure, I'm just answering my emails, I'm just triaging my way through the day. And I will assert that what we really have, it's not really alert fatigue, it's mission fatigue. What are we really doing? What's our end result? How are we delivering value? And I'm going to bring up that cool buzzword, alignment. I'm going to save some of the other buzzwords for later because I don't want to break them all out at once. But when I say alignment, I mean our performance. How are we aligned with our companies? And from a security perspective, I had a long history of doing things independent of the business. Funny story, the first time I went to the CEO and said, hey, I need X number of $1,000 for vulnerability management. And he's like, why? I'm like, look at this report. See all this red stuff in here? He's like, what's red mean? I'm like, red is bad. Red's really bad. Red's scary. He's like, how scary? I'm like, super scary. He's like, oh, well, you put it that way. But what he asked me was the question of, okay, we're not already doing this today. What have I lost because I'm not already doing this? I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. And the answer was, I worked at a trucking company, and it was a good friend of mine, Dr. Blaine Burnham, who said, you went to the CEO of a trucking company, you couldn't tell him how patching vulnerabilities related to his capacity to deliver truckloads. You lost before you ever walked in. And we do that, and that's something that we've done. And so alert fatigue, mission fatigue, I think there's no shortage of effort. Everybody's working hard. Our teams are working hard. My team is working hard right now, although I heard they're taking a break and watching this online. So, hi team, welcome. So we're drowning. Oh, I just went way too far. My apologies. Apparently I'm not certified to do this. All right. Apologies for any dizziness. So how did we get here? What happened? You know, are we in a cyberpunk dystopia? I saw this meme. Oop, you're not able to see that. Oh, there we go. Making sure I'm on the right slide. Not PowerPoint certified. What happened? I learned a new word when I got here, and that was accreted. I'm like, ooh, that sounds icky. It's worse than that. It's how we built programs. We accreted. It's an amalgamation. From a dental perspective, an amalgam buildup is when the dentist starts layering metal over a tooth until he has a tooth. And we've done that with security. We have accreted security. Going back to 1996, there was about 100 or so vendors. Most of you probably have more emails from vendors in your mailbox right now than that, right? So go forward 10 years. 10 years isn't that long, and we saw an almost epic jump from, hey, we're happy to have firewalls. We were debating firewalls. We're like, do we get proxy-based firewalls or deep packet inspection firewalls? That was our religious war in 1997. Go forward 10 years. We see a jump in the complexity. We started buying more stuff. We started seeing more business problems, the evidence of business problems, although we might not have looked at it as business problems. We said, well, poor business people, they don't really know what they're doing. They're clicking on stuff and they're doing this and they're sending spreadsheets full of social security numbers and they just don't understand. Might have been true. You know what was also true? We didn't understand. So we started buying stuff to solve the superficial problems. And we fast forward again 10 years and we go from a few vendors to a lot more vendors, and we have cloud access security brokers. We have zero trust, which became the shining star to guide the three wise men to yet another security nirvana. Zero trust. I actually had a discussion with a CIO one time. He goes, well, I don't really need a CISO. I'm implementing zero trust. We'll have security fully in hand within 18 months. A few years later, guess what they're still implementing? Zero trust. So 2020, 2025, along the way we kept adding, and we kept adding, we kept accreting, we kept finding these things to solve the problems that were in front of us without ever really looking at what we were solving. So how's that working out for us? All right, I picked data to show the problem I wanted to illustrate. But if you go back to the beginnings of the Verizon data back around 2010, you might say, well, the world was far less complex in 2010, less reporting, less stuff. All true. Not going to debate that. But what has happened and what is undeniable and incontrovertible through the data is we see the exponential growth in our exposure. We see the growth in the number of events that are happening. And we see the outcome of those events. Don't take Ponemon and IBM in the literal sense. They're like, well, you're going to lose $9.36 million. I'm like, let me write that down, 9.36. Then I can go show the board 9.36. And what is it going to mean to them? Not much. They're going to say, well, where'd you get that? And I'm like, well, I got it from IBM Ponemon. They're like, who is Ponemon? So they're not going to know that. But the average incident by cost has come to this point. The data that I took from the slide was also the exponential growth in cyber liability insurance. Now, coming from the cyber liability brokerage side, supporting cyber liability brokers, use broker multiple times in one sentence, was that I saw that exponential rise. Why did cybersecurity liability go up so much? Because guess what? Insurance likes to make money, and when they start losing money on the controls that we're not implementing, they raise our rates. The rates go up. The number of events is going up. The amount of their liability is going up. And when we come to something that's $4 to $5 million, that's not just an incident, that's a P&L hit. All right, so I want to apologize to all my friends at Gartner. I still know people. I named Paul Proctor probably. He was one of the folks that helped me, kind of focus this talk. But the hype cycle is sort of a hype cycle. It's almost like a haiku of facetiousness in a way, right? In that the hype cycle is about hype, and is it about the reality? And people live to get the new hype cycle. What's the new hot thing? And I have chased that. And I'm going to talk about cyber risk quantification because at one point that was actually a really hot thing. But the inflated set of thoughts, and the point to this slide is, my argument is we can't ignore the fundamentals. And if we're off chasing these windmills, then we're missing the things that are actually happening around us. These aren't tech failures. The pursuit of these things are more leadership failures because we rely on these cycles to help support our argument that we are relevant, that we're relevant to the businesses we support. And that here's the thing is the hype cycle, nobody knows this. The hype cycle isn't going to prevent people from lateral movement across our companies, living off the land. If living off the land campaigns and the transition from exploits and exploit kits and what we used to call RATs, remote access Trojans, that was an old thing. The transition to, we don't need that anymore, we just use all the tools you gave us. We're going to talk about how do we start to starve these people out? Well, let's talk about the fundamentals. So I brought up the Verizon data, and there's a few key things that came away from me. The takeaway from this slide, you can read all the bullets, and hopefully the slides are available. I don't mind if they get published and shared with folks. If not, I'll share them through LinkedIn or something. I'm more than happy to do so. But third-party involvement has doubled, and what does that mean? It means something. We're going to talk about quantum cryptography a little bit later in part of our future look. But it means that external exposure is resulting in negative events for us, negative events meaning breaches and incidents because of the third parties, and that means third-party risk management. Complexity is going up. The number of human errors, human-associated errors, has doubled. The number of breaches associated with misconfigurations continues to go up. And yet, there's something that I really want to focus on here, which is the ransomware cycle at 3.8 days. Somebody, I think, brought out, how long does it take to mitigate a breach? 247 days? Look at the cycle time for ransomware, 3.8 days. They can get in and install their stuff, lateral movement across the company. I'm like, dude, I would totally hire them if they did something legit. 3.8 days, you can get something implemented in 4 days? I'm in. But please don't. So ransomware, 44%. Ransomware's kind of, maybe we've reached a bit of a stasis, a bit of an equilibrium with that because the number of claims is actually going down a bit. Gen AI, people keep talking about AI. I had to put it in the slide deck because SEO is a thing. But it's being used in ways that maybe we didn't expect. We're using it to accelerate our work, and so are the bad guys. The acceleration cycle is happening all over the board for us, for the attackers. And so the real takeaway that I'll call out from this isn't about doing everything. It's about doing the things that matter fast enough to make a difference. So what works if we still do it? This is the laundry list. How many of y'all have, sorry, I went into Southern jargon here. How many have filled out a CyberSecurity liability submission form? Anybody show of hands? All right, well, not enough. All right, so I can't relate the pain involved in that, but if one of your brokers came up, at Marsh we had what we called the Marsh 12 things. It was actually a lot more controls, but some controls matter more than others, and in the slides further on, I'm going to focus on a very few key select slides that I kind of call the red letter slides, the red letter items that really make a difference in your submission, whether you get insurance or not, how much insurance is going to charge you for your coverage. Some of these things are independent of your actual posture, and they have to do with what industry are you in. If you're a payment processor, for example, you're at a lot more risk. If you're a trucking company, different kind of risk. And sometimes whether or not you get coverage from certain carriers depends on really what you do. So I have one crazy item here, and I had to add it because as I was talking with some of the folks that helped me with this, they said, well, here's a crazy thing to ask people. Is it worse to patch immediately or 30 days or 60 days? Actually, they had a customer who said, you know what, I'm just tired of this. I'm going to start patching immediately because the odds of me losing systems and the pain of dealing with vulnerability-related breaches is actually more than just letting the patches go out, which breaks prevailing wisdom. So let's keep moving on because I want to talk a little bit. I'm gonna auger in here a little bit on quantitative risk assessment. When I saw this quote from Doug Hubbard, I was thinking about I thought, how funny that is that for other people? I thought, yeah, that doesn't mean me. And then I looked and I kind of pointed the thumb, right? What has two thumbs? And it was me. I thought, oh, have I been solving problems with my risk management, or am I adding to the overhead, the noise, and the lack of decision? And I'm going to talk about that a little bit because I wanted to showcase this as the opportunity, and the opportunity that we have is to make risk management germane to the operation of our companies, which is, trust me, I'm going to land this, at least I hope so, back to the fundamentals. So there's a little bit of quantitative fatigue. Around 2016, 2017, quantitative risk management was one of the hot things, and it was just ramping up like crazy. It was taking off like an F-14 from a ship, right? It was just the afterburners are on, and we are going to solve problems. Frankly, I didn't see that I was probably repeating the CIO's mistake of thinking that Zero Trust was going to solve all of his problems, but I thought, if I can put risk into business terms, I will have found the Rosetta Stone to unlock risk management, make it meaningful to the business. Instead, what we got caught up in is kind of the theater of math, because we wound up having to talk about what a Monte Carlo simulation was, and why one simulation didn't look the same as the other simulation. It was like playing Sesame Street. One of these things isn't like the other because it's a random simulation. And we started coming up with loss exceedance curves, and we started coming at the business with all of these terminologies. And like Gartner said 4 years ago, they're like, well, that's helpful, but it's not really helping me make any decisions. So what we instead generated was passive risk retention. And I'll get to passive risk, and I'll jump in on that in a little bit, but what we did is what I would call the illusion of precision. We are precisely honing in on things that people said, I don't know, what do you want me to do about it? There's some wins in there, there's some losses, and the bottom line is it's complex. We took a lot of time to try and implement it, and the outcome wasn't necessarily actionable, even if what we did was considered helpful. And I am FAIR certified because I find that approach really, and the language behind it, super helpful to talk about risk. We can go off on that one on a side note, but here's one of the key things I want to take away. Lesson learned. It's not that you shouldn't measure everything. You can't possibly measure everything. We started developing libraries. We said, well, we have to get an inventory of all the systems, and then we have to do this, we have to do that, we have to develop the library, and suddenly we're 3 years into it. We've only solved one problem. We've only solved one. We've spent 3 years on this. So I'm not saying that risk quantification is bad. It's an awesome model, but sometimes a qualitative assessment is sufficient. You can't analyze and quantify everything in your enterprises. Enterprises are complex. By the time you get to the end of that, you're probably exhausted, and you've probably gone back to the mission fatigue of, wait a minute, we're here, but where did we start from, and where was it we were trying to go? But man, we were super busy for a while. I was going to call this, I had another title for it, but the bottom line is decisions actually do make themselves. If we don't make a decision, and I think this happens all the time, we're like, well, let's table that for the moment, right? Let's table that decision. We can't get to a decision on it. This is precisely what passive risk retention is. It's declining to act. It's a failure to act. It's a failure to even identify risk. And this goes back to one of the premise of the talk, which is that if we're not identifying actual risk, if we're not managing risks that are germane, using that twice, my apologies, but that matter to the company, to the operation of the company, then we're adding to the risk. We are causing and building passive risk retention in the companies. We're actually poisoning the very ecosystem that we are meant to help and that we're meant to safeguard. We're doing the opposite of safeguarding. We're adding layers of noise to the organization. So some of you might recognize this is actually a lyric from the song "Free Will" by the rock group Rush. So you can Google that one. It's one of my favorite songs. So not that you came here to learn about my favorite music, but passive risk retention is a thing, and I'm going to spend just a little bit more time, and then we're going to get to the core concepts of what are those fundamentals and how do we get there. Passive risk retention quite often is the difference between where we tell people we are, what is a board deck, and where we really are. I'm not saying people don't tell the truth on board decks, but you always try to be optimistic, because if you put something negative on there, the first time I did a report to the board, the CFO said, "You've got a red item on the slide." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, it's red, it's bad." And he's like, "You can't show that to the board." I'm like, "What do you mean I can't show that to the board? I want to tell the truth." He goes, "If you show a red item on there, the rest of the meeting is going to go right off the rails, and you're going to get barbecued." I'm like, "Well, I like barbecue. Kansas City is just down the road." So it's the difference between where we think or say we are and where we really are, and the difference in between is passive risk. And I'm going to use a non-cyber example here, which is Silicon Valley Bank. A lot of us have kind of forgotten about it. I remembered it because this slide is actually 2 years old, and I had it from the last time I did this talk. But Silicon Valley Bank actually did not have a chief risk officer. There were some key items that they, not having a risk officer, failed to identify and act on, which was the impact of interest rates on their operations, and they failed. They failed their customers. They failed the fabric of the economy. They just flat out failed, and it was called out by Michael Barr from the Fed, who said that their risk management wasn't even attached to reality, wasn't aligned with reality. And there goes that word alignment again. The other word we're going to pick on later, the other buzzword, is going to be synergy. Let's bring up synergy. All right, know the business, or you're guessing. This is actually, I created this slide from scratch, actually. You wouldn't know it, but I think it took me about 3 weeks to put this model together, because there was a book about Business Canvas. If you've ever seen it, it was about business models, and I was thinking about business models and how do I relate security to the business model of the company. And weirdly enough, after 3 weeks, I came up with this, and you're thinking, wow, how do we hire this guy? That's awesome. You got arrows. It looks like a kraken coming out of the ocean. But it's all about proportionality. The service chain, the value chain. Every company creates some product. I know it sounds weird, but they do. They have something they do that people pay us to do, and we're here to protect that capacity to generate value. And when we put in solutions that are disproportionate to the problem, we're slowing down the execution, the creation of value, and the delivery of value. We're slowing that down. And so we want the minimum amount of friction possible, and we do that through proportionality, which means that take any framework you want. I don't care what your framework is. I'm not going to debate about frameworks. I don't care about 853 or CSF or CIS or any of them. Don't care. I've done 2701 and all that. It all comes down to the core things that you do and applying them every single day in proportion to keep that company operating, because ransomware doesn't lock files. I mean, it does, but what it really does is it disrupts the delivery of value, and that means that companies are not going to get paid. Now, business impact analysis has a bit of a bad name. It's known to be a hill that things crawl up to die on sometimes, kind of like IAM. Somebody told me a joke one time. I took on IAM. They said, "Okay, how many CISOs does it take to implement IAM?" I'm like, "I don't know, they're like 2.5. I'm like, Actually, I gave away the punchline, but how long does it take? I'm like 2.5 CISOs. This is why I don't tell jokes. So do you know the value creation chain? And there's a lot of them in our companies. But do we know the fundamental operating model? Do you know what the company delivers at the end of the day? Carrix, we are part of delivering freight in the terminals, right? SSA Marine, one of the biggest operating portion of our company. If you go into Seattle, you look down at the other end of the terminals, you'll see our cranes down there. It's an awesome place to go, by the way. I love those cranes. Best six-story ride you'll ever have. If you're afraid of heights and wind movement, don't go there. So, top-down model. We can do a BIA. You can do this verbally, visually. You don't have to start at the bottom with, well, first we got to inventory all of the IT systems. Welcome to the next 18 months of your life, at the end of which you probably won't have any model around how to do a BIA. Start top-down. Start talking to the key stakeholders. Meet your stakeholders. Find out what they do, who the people are that do the things for them, the key processes. Don't ever mention process to them. I went into the first meeting for a BI going, what are your top 3 business processes? And they looked at me like I'd been smoking weed. They were like, what are you talking about? Talk to them, what are the things people do every day? And who are the people that do them? Let's talk to them. And let's go talk to those top 3 levels, first 3 levels of the company to find out the operating model, how they run. Now we can go back to the key systems. We can deliver value right away. So I'm sorry, you came in here for fundamentals, and I'm going to get to those right about now. All right. Key cyber liability controls. Now, I said I was going to have 4 on here. I found a way to sneak in 6. I cheated a bit. So these are the things, and this is going to be maybe where some of my data actually comes in. We did have data. One of the things when I went to Marsh was I thought, whoa, I'm going to get the inside view. I'm going to have all of the metrics from the insurance industry at my fingertips, and I'm going to unlock more mysteries. It turns out it really wasn't that simple. But some of the data we did have, and this was a surprise to me, and this goes back to things I learned that I did not expect, was number one control that the analytics said aligned with reduction of risk was system hardening. Do you have a standard image or standard configuration for your systems? It's a basic CIS control, and that was like the 5x multiplier for, hey, this is a big deal. Have a standardized configuration, secure configuration, because once the bad guys and girls are inside of your network, lateral movement. And if you have that secure profile, you're giving yourself some more time to find that, to detect it and react to it and reduce that dwell time. Now there's some other parts to that. EDR is table stakes, but sometimes it's interesting to, as I was talking to companies, I go, what do you guys run, for endpoint protection? They name something, I'm like, I've never heard of that, but okay, let's find out what it does. There's the big 3, there's CrowdStrike. Hello, July outage, right before my first audit committee report. So CrowdStrike and SentinelOne, and basically I'm not here to sell you any brands. I don't really care. I care about the outcome. Vulnerability and patch management, reduce that exploitable area. Timely patching. So when you talk to insurance carriers, they're going to say, for 0 days, do you have a protocol to patch out a band? They might not say it quite that way, but that's what they're asking is, in the event of a really critical, remotely exploitable vulnerability, can you expedite it and get it into production in like 72 hours, 48 hours, far less than 5 days? Because think about that 3.8 days for deployment of ransomware from, hey, we got in, to 3.8 days later, they're fully inculcated into your systems. They're operating as you and living off the land is happening. So patching and vulnerability management. Privileged access management actually has multiple facets. And the number one piece of privileged access management that the insurance data really surfaced for us was removal of admin privileges from end users. Remove admin privileges from your end users. Because if they have admin privileges, that's really how a lot of bad things happen. And one of the surprising conversations I had when I was at Marsh was with a payment processor, and I said, hey, you marked here that all your people have admin privileges. They're like, well, of course they do. Like, you're a payment processor. This is let's talk about this a little more. And so the payment processor proceeded to tell me that, hey, we trust our people. They know how to operate. That was a frustrating conversation, but removal of those local admin privileges is a really big deal. I'm not here to peddle any particular software, so however you do it, Microsoft Lapse and removal of those admin privileges. And again, I'm not representing Microsoft here. Whether it's CyberArk, whatever it is, get those local admin privileges under control and make management of them systematic. It's never going to be perfect, but you do these 4 things and you're miles ahead of a lot of folks. All right, this was a cool one because I took a whole bunch of concepts and put it into Napkin AI, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. I like that fish head diagram. So when we say fishbone diagram, so this is about attackers don't need to break in anymore. They just need to sound like you. Deep fakes are a thing. It's part of the toolkit, and we take a few things. Think about Gen AI. We had in the wake up call around, hey, we have a committee. We're producing a policy to get Gen AI in hand and start to handle this risk. That ship sailed. Our people have been shoveling data into AI tools all over the world for probably 3 years now, maybe 4 years. The day that ChatGPT went public was the day that our data instantly started going into the cloud. And it's there already, and whether we have a policy ready or not, our exposure is already there, and that is another example of passive risk. So there's a number of things here in terms of what's new and the uncertainties. These are the new things. I'm going to land this back to those fundamentals around awareness, policy, governance, these core things that we need to do, and we need to do them well, because none of these things, even MFA fatigue, one of the fundamentals that the insurers ask you about is, hey, do you train your people? Do you have awareness training for people? Now, the next question they don't ask it is it actual exercise, or is it just a checkbox because, hey, we got KnowBe4, we're going to automate it, and when people join, we run this automated training through? Or are we actually training people based on their roles, based on their importance? Are we identifying the VIPs? Are we working with our finance teams? HR gets picked on a lot. We need to deliver this in a way that, again, is relevant, because if we don't, the way that they learn it is going to be through a series of unfortunate events. Good book. So we need to keep up with it. There's things that are coming. Today's sexy threats. I had to have something in here about AI again and deepfakes because, again, SEO is a thing. But I had this really interesting moment a few years ago. I had a security team in India and in China, and I was interviewing somebody, a remote candidate, and I like to be interactive. You might not have picked up on it, but I can be a little random. And so they were talking, I'm like, wait a minute, and I, and the person stopped, their mouth stopped moving, but the answer kept coming. That was my first encounter with I don't know if it was a deep fake. The person was really there, but they were using a service so that they could answer all of my questions, and they were doing a bang-up job, and I'm like, wait a minute. And I tested it a few more times. I'm like, oh, hold up. I'm going to explore that answer a little more. And sure enough, it happened like 3 out of 3 times. I'm like, whoa, hard pass. I want to harp here a little bit on living off the land, and this one just drives me crazy. It just drives me crazy because they're getting into our companies and they're eating our food, right? We're feeding these attackers. They don't have to bring in fancy toolkits. They just act like us. Turns out they're pretty good at IT administration. Who knew? Again, there's another service there they could render that would be really valuable. But living off the land, we gave them the tools to rob us. They're stealing from us with our own tools. They're using, our own systems. One of the stories that drove me crazy was a company, I can't name names, but CrowdStrike was used to attack this company because they didn't have correct security over the roles to log into CrowdStrike. And so CrowdStrike became a weapon, not the one that went off last July. Sorry, too soon. So here's one of the things that we did, for my current program. We have all these things, we have all these gaps and we know about, and we're doing all these things. And one of the first things we did, aside from adding 24/7 monitoring, was we hired a security awareness analyst. We hired a full-time awareness professional, and we didn't go into the IT ranks to do it. We went to, this was a pretty cool candidate. They were a college admissions person, and they knew how to deal with multiple people and talk with people. I'm like, all right, you're in. This is perfect. So our awareness of the landscape, the threat landscape, as we like to say, and are we teaching people these things? Are we ourselves aware of it? Because fake job interviews are a thing, and now it's become a full, we see the stories about, North Korean folks working remote, becoming part of our remote workforce. These are things, and these are things that are on our horizon. And so let's talk about future proofing. I know we talked about the past. I went back to 1996. But right now, I want to focus a little bit on crypto, on quantum cryptography and on quantum computing, because I see this on the horizon, and it worries me a lot. And I know I've been talking about fundamentals, but this is fundamental data protection and thinking about the third parties that we have. We've entrusted people. We're giving, the Snowflake use case came up. What is Snowflake doing with our data? How is Snowflake protecting our data? And if you've read a SOC 2, you know that somewhere in all of the legalese is the entity level controls where they go, oh, by the way, this is your risk. We do this, you have to do this. So SOC 2 type 2 isn't, it's great, but it's not everything. Quantum cryptography, the data that people are stealing today may represent a large payout for them in the future as quantum computing comes along, and all of the data we encrypted. When I started taking the initial training to get a CISSP, and they're like, how many rounds of encryption are included in triple DES? I'm like, I don't care. Not the right answer. If you're taking the test, don't answer that one. So this is a vector, and so some of the things that we've done in the past may come to haunt us in the future. I think we do need to be looking into, how our key vendors, whether it's ADP or whomever they are, how are they working to protect our data? Because the quantum computing piece is coming. It's not the next scary monster. It's just another thing to be aware of that's on our horizon view. Leveraging AI. I think every tool that we talk to today has an AI integration, but is it really helping us? And so going back to those fundamental controls around detection, response, vulnerability management, analysis of logs, the MDR, I'm not sure if that's even the correct current vernacular for the managed detection and response, our external SOC services, and AI, and how they're using that as part of the playbooks to speed up their detection, speed up the response, because 3.8 days, the folks that get in are looking to deploy ransomware in less than 4 days. That doesn't give us a whole lot of time. I'm going to talk about that time a little bit more, but access to sensitive data. If you've done a Gen AI internal rollout, Copilot, for example, and you start testing, and suddenly we're like, hey, I know how much Bob in accounting makes. Because you can ask it. You go ask it, because somebody has a spreadsheet published with company-wide access, and in that company-wide access, it turns out it was, the access was for the whole company, because when they shared it, they didn't specify who the audience was. Go look at that data exposure, and suddenly you got a whole new picture of things inside the company and processes that maybe you didn't know about. So what can we do today? Upskilling our teams. This is a place of dramatic underinvestment, because in the 200 companies that I talked to, I don't think there was any call out on the budget around the training for the teams. And this can go back to, are you funding tabletops even? Are you funding meaningful tabletops? Not the one where you sit in a room and everybody throws, paper wads at one another, or that kind of thing. And at the end of the day, we go, and we're done with that. Let's move on and go back to our daily show. It's real exercises that have an outcome that results in findings, that results in improvements in how we deliver that incident response. I'm going to harp on the 3.8 days again because according to Gen AI, I do tangents a lot. So upskill the teams. Build policies before things get rolled out. We're way behind the curve on Gen AI. Do we even have policies? Are the policies readable by human beings? Can they read the policy and know what we expect of them? Evaluate third parties. Third-party risk management, as it turns out, is kind of an art as well as a science. But this is one of the things we need to add to the due diligence for our third parties, and that was with regard to their plans for encryption for all of the data that we're going to entrust them with. All right. All of this is not magic. Magic starts with fundamentals. It starts with doing these things that make security, if not look easy, make it consistent. Do our teams know what matters? Are the things that we're doing helping people in the business? Are we able to express how we deliver assurance, right? Assurance to operate. Are we clarifying for people why a control might be necessary? Are we able to have that discussion? Or are we just throwing bait over the side and chumming, hoping that we catch something good? When something smells off, when something doesn't look right, does the business know who to call? Do they know how to get a hold of the help desk? This is fundamental. Incident response starts with that weird call. It can't be that they remembered there's some guy named Tony in IT, and I talked to Tony. I'm going to call Tony and see if this is normal or not. Call the service desk. Do you have a service desk? Is that response training rolled out to our service desk? Do people know how to call the security team and get first, second, third level support because that speed matters? Now, I don't know, I won't apologize for it, but I said, when all hell breaks loose, will the muscle memory be there? And this is the part where we do things again and again, and this is why we do consistent routine exercises, tabletops, meaningful tabletop exercises that really test people, and we develop the muscle memory to do things consistently at a level that matters. We have to deliver this at a level that matters and in a way that makes a difference in whether things are up, things are down, whether lateral movement occurs, or whether we stop it before that 3.8-day timer goes off. It's about clarity and judgment and people trusting us, the security team, with the operation of the company. Last slide. I promise there is one last slide, but this is the last slide. So 5 things. I was at a Gartner conference once and it said, hey, put a number on the slide and tell people the things. But legit, ownership. Passive risk is about the lack of ownership, the lack of identification, taking responsibility for the security outcomes. And that means not just us, the security people, because if we allow that risk to slide and we allow them to say, well, we'll address that next year, we've accumulated risk. Who's owning that? My security manager asks all the time, he goes, well, a decision was made. Who owns that risk? And at first I was like, oh, come on, man. But he's right. If we make a decision to delay something, somebody owns that. That ownership has to be clear. The other thing has to be clear is that people understand when we're in the middle of the fight, who's making the decision? Are they authorized to make a decision? Can they follow that playbook? Can they shut off operations? Can they contain? Do they have that authority? Can they go ahead and act? Are we prioritizing what matters? Do we know the business model? Do we know that if we have an event over here in this system, I know it's visual, and for the folks online, I'll wave bigger, that this matters. An event here is critical. Maybe it's your ERP system. Do we know the components of the ERP system? We don't have to know all the details, but there's a repository here that matters, and we need to know that an event here takes priority. Speed and agility, the clarity that comes with the focus also means that we're able to act quickly, and we have to enable people for the judgment to act. And that brings us back to the fundamentals, and that's how execution is done, is through all of the daily grind. It's not through the really big dollar products and things, they have to fulfill our purpose. We can't just go and buy them and think we've solved a problem. The problem has to be solved through our knowledge of our business, through the knowledge of our operations, through enabling and teaching our people how these things work and giving them the judgment and the clarity to act. All right, I'm going to leave you with one pithy saying here, and this is actually from a book. I didn't Gen AI this. This is a book I actually read, and it's about, we want to make a difference in the world. If I think about when somebody writes a book, what do I value about the book? It's that they took the time to write down their thoughts. I'm a huge reader of, I know it's going to sound weird, but Dostoevsky. So I know we shouldn't say we read Russian authors, but it's the sharing of thoughts as a means to an end, and that's what I hope I was able to share a little bit of with you today. Thank you. All right, questions? I used to have a point on here that said Netflix series offers. Oh, we got one. Hold on. They're going to bring you a microphone, sir.
I was hoping you could expand a little bit on, well, first of all, thank you very much for a very, very good and insightful presentation. Was hoping you could expand a bit on the concept and role of a security awareness analyst and kind of what's in, what the life cycle of the deployment of that role is, how you selected and trained that person. It's a brilliant idea. I think it has a lot of potential. Would like to learn more.
Yeah, when we looked at, so we had a CIO join the company, and he's like, hey, who's reaching out to the people that fail our phishing tests? And I'm like, well, we have this automated thing, and it sends out an email. And he's like, well, did they take the training? I'm like, oh, I got other fish to fry, And so from the security analyst position, we thought about, number one, the follow-up, right? People fail phishing tests. Do we reach out to them? Do we find out why they failed the test? And sometimes it's operational complexity. Think about accounts payable, for example. What do they get in their inbox? Things that say, pay this invoice. What do a whole lot of these attacks look like? Hey, pay this invoice. And so how do we help secure those mailboxes? And so that's a risk to the company. It's actually a material risk to the company because there's those $1 million, $3 million, $6 million transfers that occur when we don't secure accounts payable, and there are ACH redirects. So we started tying it back to kind of our risk register around, hey, the accounting function is sensitive. We have other sensitive areas, HR and others, but we looked at, number one, that the 3 or 4 key, I'll call it use cases, and said, these are the things that we need the security analyst, the awareness analyst to do. Number one is, plan the training. Planning the training isn't just an exercise of, well, we checked the box in Proofpoint or in KnowBe4 or in Abnormal or whatever it is. It's like, yep, we're training people. It's like, no, you're just assigning them automated training. I think we actually need to care and plan what people are trained on. And so number one is taking the time, giving somebody that time to look at the organization, have the understanding, establish the communications, talk to HR, talk to the business leaders, in our case, in Mexico, Panama, Canada, and all over the US, and say, what is it, how can we help you do this? Now, there's also some other things we did, which I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm on board with this, but we executed a phishing training, so the executive whose line of business does the least well might have the big ugly trophy on their desk, which is kind of fun. When you walk through the executive offices, you're like, I see you. So we outlined those use cases and said, hey, we're not following up, we're not paying attention, we're not really dedicating any, what's the term, calories to this. We're just kind of going through the motion, and it's way more important than that. And then we started developing the customized training for our business functions and lines of business, and putting our customized training up into the LMS system, and so that the training they got was relevant to them instead of, here are 3 things to know about phishing, that kind of thing. So I hope that answers the question. Oh, come on, somebody, anybody. All right, well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time.